May 1943, northern France. The sky trembles. American bomber pilots clutch their controls as nearly 400 B-17 flying fortresses approach the coast of Saint-Nazaire. Below them, somewhere hidden beneath the earth, lies one of Nazi Germany's most prized possessions, a submarine pen that is launched U-boats on devastating missions across the Atlantic. These underwater killers have already sent over 2 million tons of Allied shipping to the ocean floor. Thousands of sailors are dead. Supply lines are strangled. And it all radiates from this single, invisible fortress buried in French soil. The mission is simple on paper: destroy it. In reality, it's about to become one of the most brutal failures in American bombing history. What the pilots didn't know was that they were about to meet an enemy unlike anything they'd ever faced. Not tanks, not artillery, not enemy fighters, but something far more sinister and impenetrable: German concrete. The Kriegsmarine, Nazi Germany's naval command, had begun construction of these U-boat pens in 1941. They weren't ordinary bunkers. These were monuments to engineering madness, each one capable of sheltering up to 12 submarines in individual concrete cradles, protected from the world above by a ceiling so thick it seemed to mock the laws of physics itself. The main roof was nearly 26 feet of solid, reinforced concrete thicker than a 3-story building is tall. Beneath that lay another layer of concrete and another, creating a labyrinth of protection that seemed designed not just to withstand bombing, but to absorb it, swallow it, and remain unmoved. The Germans had learned from their earlier mistakes. When the British bombed other facilities, they studied the damage patterns. They calculated penetration depths. They consulted their greatest engineers. And then they built the U-boat pens to be literally unbeatable. At least, that was what they believed. By 1943, 5 of these massive structures stood along the Atlantic coast at Saint-Nazaire, Brest, Lorient-la-Palus, and Bordeaux. They were operational. They were deadly. And they were, apparently, indestructible. The American command made a decision. If conventional bombing wouldn't work, they would try something new. On that May morning, as the B-17s approached Saint-Nazaire, their bomb bays were loaded with 5,000-pound bombs, massive, armor-piercing weapons designed specifically to penetrate fortifications. This was going to be different. This was going to work. The pilots pushed forward. Anti-aircraft fire erupted beneath them, but the bombers pressed on. Flak burst around the formation, and men screamed in the turrets as hot metal tore through fuselage and flesh. But still they came. The target was too important to turn back. Every bomber had a job to do. Every bomb mattered. Then they opened their bomb bay doors. For 30 terrifying seconds, the sky rained fire and thunder. Over 3,000 tons of ordnance fell on Saint-Nazaire. The earth itself seemed to convulse. Massive explosions tore apart the surrounding city, obliterated buildings for miles around, and created craters so massive they looked like the landscape of an alien world. The entire coastal town was essentially erased from existence. Civilians who had nothing to do with submarines or war simply ceased to exist. Entire families gone. The destruction was so complete that surviving residents later struggled to recognize their own streets. The pilots circled back through the smoke, watching the devastation unfold beneath them. Surely nothing could survive that. Surely the U-boat pen was destroyed. They had dropped more tonnage than was used on some entire cities. This was overkill. This was overwhelming force. This was American industrial power unleashed without mercy. But when the smoke cleared, German observers emerged from their own shelters and approached the target area. What they found would echo through American command for the rest of the war. The U-boat pen stood essentially untouched. Its massive concrete roof, blackened by blast and scarred by near misses, had held firm. Inside, the submarines remained safe in their cradles. The pens themselves showed only superficial damage, cracks in the concrete, some structural stress, but nothing that would take more than weeks to repair. The surrounding city, yes, lay in ruins. But the target? The actual objective? It had won. This wasn't a one-time anomaly. Over the next 2 years, the Allies would return again and again. The campaign against the U-boat pens became one of the most sustained bombing operations of the entire war. American and British bombers flew thousands of sorties. They dropped over 250,000 tons of bombs on these 5 locations. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to the tonnage dropped on entire nations. And yet the U-boat pens survived. The mystery wasn't why Germany had built them so strong. The mystery was why American planners hadn't anticipated this. The concrete technology was Nazi Germany's greatest weapon against Allied air superiority. While the Luftwaffe was being shredded in the skies, while German industry was being systematically dismantled, while their cities burned, the U-boat pens remained defiant, protected by walls of concrete that seemed to absorb punishment. The way granite absorbs rainfall? What made these structures so impossibly strong? It wasn't just thickness. It was engineering genius born from necessity. The Germans had reinforced the concrete with layers of steel rods, creating a composite material that could absorb explosive shock, waves, and redistribute force across the entire structure, rather than concentrating it at a single point. They had angled the walls so that blast pressure would be deflected rather than concentrated. They had created interior compartments so that even if one section was damaged, the others would remain sealed and functional. And they had done all of this while maintaining enough precision that submarines could still be loaded and unloaded with mechanical lifts inside. The concrete was so well engineered that many of these pens still stand today in Saint-Nazaire, France, now monuments to a grim chapter of history, but also testament to what happens when brilliant engineers serve a monstrous cause. Some have been converted into museums. Others remain as they were found, massive tombs of steel and concrete that somehow survived the most devastating bombing campaign in human history. The American failure at Saint-Nazaire and the other U-boat pens represented something uncomfortable. Sometimes superior firepower isn't enough. Sometimes raw tonnage of explosives cannot overcome brilliant engineering. Sometimes your enemy sees the problem before you do and solves it so completely that your weapons become almost meaningless. In the end, the U-boat threat wasn't defeated by destroying the pens. It was defeated by other means-better convoy tactics, improved radar, the breaking of German codes, and the gradual attrition of submarines as American hunter-killer groups became more effective. But the concrete pens remained standing, a reminder that warfare isn't always won by the nation with the biggest bombs. It's won by the nation that thinks one step ahead.